I learned that the helicopter that Joe flew, and I'm not an expert, so everything that I say may be completely wrong. It's not a huge helicopter. That's what it says in the literature. To me, it sounds huge, right? So it's roughly 20 meters long, 10 tons heavy, 30 passenger, more than 190 miles per hour, and it costs about 15 million pounds. So all these numbers may be completely wrong, but to me, they sound very big. Um, and I think that is exciting. So Joe flew these helicopters on military missions. Um, and if I can say that, she went through a personal experience as a passenger when one of these helicopters crashed. So we are going to listen to somebody who knows about decision making, about errors, threats, and management of that. We know somebody who knows that from a professional side, but also from a personal side. I think that in itself would be remarkable. How do you continue after that? So Joe decided to become a teacher, and then at one point in time joined CAE as an instructional designer. And when I met her, it was just a time when the Human Performance Excellence Council was launched. And since then, whenever that council meets, and I try to be there every time, which does not work all the time, I try to be there all the time, it's Joe who runs the sessions and so on. And this story makes all these connections from an intellectual approach, from a personal experience approach, but from a training and education approach to something that could be helpful to all of us. And thinking about these, whatever vocabulary you're used to use, non-technical skills, human performance, human factors, and so on, they all sort of accumulate, I think, in what she's going to talk about. And just like this morning, this is a unique perspective, so I encourage you to listen carefully. So the official title is about threat and error management. That doesn't sound very civilian to me, but it's something that is relevant to all of us in our medical field. So the perspective that Joe is going to give us is relevant, even if she comes from a different angle. Very curious, and I think that's going to be a great presentation. Thanks a lot, Joe.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Stefan. Nice to meet you all. Thank you so much for today so far to start off with. It has been really eye-opening for me, coming from an aviation world, from an education world, and then to see it all slotting together with healthcare. I still don't understand half of the long words and titles that you all have, but I'm learning. So yeah, this is what we're going to talk about this afternoon. And I thought I'd just go through a little bit more about why I'm standing here on the stage today, why I'm the one talking to you about threat and error management. And as Stefan said, I come from the Royal Air Force. That's kind of the me part, I guess. If people still say, what do you do? I still find it really tempting to say, I'm a helicopter pilot. A, because it sounds really cool. And B, because I think that's where my heart still is. I would love to be still doing this. In fact, this photo was taken in 2009, and it was part of the first all-female crew that we never actually flew together. Because really sadly, this aircraft crashed with me and with one of the crewmen in the back of it 2 days later. So we had all the photos taken, and then, oopsie. Wasn't me flying it at the time, so I'd like to get that one straight clear. That was not my piloting skills on that occasion. I've had plenty of bouncy landings myself, but what pilot doesn't, right, Dave? Yeah, look at him. No, not me at all. So I really loved the aviation world, and after my helicopter crash, I was devastated. I damaged my back. And I was told, no, that's it, you've lost your flying cat. I could go and get a civilian flying cat. The Air Force said I could stay on and do air traffic control. But when your heart is really into something, I think a lot of you feel that same draw to healthcare that I felt to aviation. When your heart is in something that much, I thought if I had to sit on the ground and watch everyone else go flying every single day, I would end up being quite bitter and twisted and cynical. So I thought, nope, going to leave the Air Force, going to take a massive step sideways and see where that takes me. And it took me here. This is they're my tutor group, aren't they all lovely? They're all adults now. And that's me very heavily pregnant with my second, so I'm a mum of two as well. I decided to go and teach science in a secondary school. Now, I often say this and people don't believe me, but the kids in that classroom tried to kill me far more times than anyone in Basra ever did. Really, really. 12 and 13-year-olds with Bunsen burners, acid, yep, 5,000 volts of electricity, yep, not a great idea, really, really not. And although I really loved the teaching, I loved seeing the students progress, I loved really helping them on the pastoral side as well, it just wasn't aviation. And that classroom, immediately out to the window to the side of that, was RAF Scampton, where the red arrows used to fly. And I would be stood there teaching science, and the kids would love it, because suddenly the red arrows would be giving this like private display just for us as they were practicing. And it just used to really hurt my heart. I knew I needed to get back to aviation. So when the opportunity arose, I was then offered a job working back with the military, teaching the pilots that were going to go through the multi-engine flying training system. So that's me teaching in a really, really old building, nice bit of carburettor icing. Excellent, really, really thrilling subject. If anyone really needs to go to sleep, I'm sure I can help with that one. But that really gave me the ability to be a technical knowledge instructor, so not just the high school sciences, but really the in-depth sciences, everything I'd learnt as a pilot, and then applying that to the multi-engine world for the military. Also gave me the experience then as courseware design and instructional systems designer. And all of those really came together then when I joined CAE. So that was 2019, so not long before COVID hit, so I didn't really have a huge amount of time. My office was actually opposite in Oxford, some of those labour simulators you've seen around today. Wow, that was a little bit scary. You just sat there minding your own business during the day, and there's some screams coming from next door, and you're thinking, oh, I don't know what's going on there. But so I started CAE as courseware developer, and I wrote a load of pilot training. And from there, Dave has then given me the wonderful opportunity to now be part of the Human Performance Council. So this is something that we have set up at CAE to be thought leaders, to look at all of these different aspects of captaincy, of a safety critical performance environment, looking at the behavioural psychology side of it as well, and really pulling all of that together to be able to do some brilliant academic research and move the safety of all of our industries forward. So that's what I hope to be doing today with this lesson. So we're going to be talking about threat and error management. And we're going to go through this in a few little steps. So we'll tiny little bit of history. I won't bore you, I promise, just to show you where we got. It's not like a history lesson at school. Then 3 things: identify, explain, and apply. I'm going to teach you how to identify threats and errors, different types, things that are going to start those discussions. Then we're going to be looking at how you're going to be able to explain those in a teaching scenario and applying them particularly with simulation. Obviously that's the focus of this. I promise to leave time at questions for the end, and if you don't get a question asked, trust me, I will be at the bar later on, so feel free to come up and ask any questions then. So a little bit of history. 1977, Tenerife. Everyone heard of this crash? Yes, no. So this was 2 747s, very experienced crew on board, 1 Pan Am crew, 1 KLM crew, really low visibility, a whole load of fog. And while they were trying to taxi down the runway so that the other one could take off, the other one did take off, or attempted to, while Pan Am was still on the runway. And the 2 747s collided. One of the worst losses of life in aviation, bar 9/11. And it really started this pressure to start to move towards, why did this happen? 2 really experienced crews. Okay, a little bit of difficult weather, but nothing that should have caused that much loss of life. 2 Boeing 747s. Then only a year later, there was another incident that occurred, and this was a United aircraft coming out of New York, I think, going to Portland, and they were on approach, about to go in, and suddenly realised there was a minor landing gear problem. Basically, one of the lights, we have 3 little lights that show us when the landing gear's down, because obviously sat up on top of the aircraft, you can't see them. And one of the lights wasn't working. And they said, well, is that because the undercarriage isn't down, or because the light's broken? Anyway, there were 3 people on the flight deck, pilot, co-pilot, and flight engineer. The aircraft ran out of fuel while they were trying to work out that the bulb was broken, and it crashed into the suburbs of Portland. So really poor management of everything that they had there. NASA then took hold of this and said, we need to do a load of research into this. And this is where the concept started to develop from what was originally cockpit resource management to crew resource management, looking at the people being involved in it, not just on a flight deck. You could start to see this being applied absolutely everywhere. And then in 1981, United Airlines actually started up a crew resource management training package, which ICAO, which is our big governing body effectively in aviation, that became a standard. And it started to be pushed out globally. 94, University of Texas did a load more work with it that started the line operation safety audit. So that's people sat in the jump seat watching and observing and seeing what improvements can be made. Because until you can necessarily identify the problem, you don't really know what to fix. And then in 1999, it really then started to move forward. And ICAO endorsed the line safety operations safety audit. And then this was the origins of threat and error management that we see today. And now this is something that is taught globally to all pilots. And I think it's really, really important. I'd like to share with you some of that today. So where are we then with healthcare? How did we get to this point? And where is healthcare along that time scale? So before the turn of the millennium, we had HSE say, yep, you need to do something on this. Not much else. They just knew you had to do something. And in fact, I didn't come across this book until 2016, when it was on the Royal Air Force Chief of the Air Staff's reading list. So most people in the Royal Air Force have read this book as well. I'm interested that Dave obviously knows Martin. I think a lot of you have come across Martin in different guises. But I think this really started to show this need that wasn't just in aviation. These lessons that we had learned since Tenerife in 1977 still were having impacts on people today. And there was something we could do about that. So the World Health Organization have put out human factors in patient safety. I'm sure you've seen these. And then the NHS itself, 2013, there's a load of documents with it. I'm sure there's a lot more around that. But you're the healthcare specialist. I shall leave those to you to find. So I was trying to look for some statistics. I thought, right, how bad is it? Like when I look at aviation, it's on the news, isn't it? Every single time a big plane crashes, or any plane crashes, even maybe one or two people, it's on the news, you see it. But I felt like I didn't really know about healthcare. I didn't really know how many of these incidents actually occurred. So I took to Google, and I managed to find this from Johns Hopkins in 2016. And this scared me a little bit. Heart disease and cancer being the only two things that were bigger than medical error in the deaths that year. And they listed them, these four here: misdiagnosis, incorrect medical dosage, medication or dosage, misidentified patient. Did you cut off the wrong person's leg? I don't know. Oh, some people are nodding. Yeah, this is how little I know about healthcare. Surgical errors. I heard someone earlier on say something about taking out the wrong kidney. Is this a left-right thing? Like, is it my left-right or your left-right? Oh. I look at lots of pilots that I've trained and thought, wow, if I ever get on holiday and I'm getting off. I'll see what stories come out from you lot in the bar later on, maybe. We'll see if I ever see you in a medical sense. It'd be nice to. But anyway, this scared me, and these are only the medical errors that have actually been said, yes, I made this medical error. They're the only identified ones. How many other unidentified medical errors are there that have caused deaths? Again, I can see quite a few nods of possibly quite a few. So this is why we need to look at threat and error management. Dave mentioned earlier, and I will touch on the edge of a just culture and being able to admit these mistakes, but it's still really, really hard to do, really hard. So we're going to look at three things now: threats, errors, and undesired states. And these three things are going to be our building blocks for how we're going to deal with these threats and errors, how we're going to manage them to get a safer environment. So let's first of all look at threats. So a person or a thing, an event that has the potential to cause damage or injury, but it's something external. It's something that kind of comes at you. It's something that you cannot necessarily control immediately. Often things that take you by surprise. It's outside of the control of the crew. So that's the really defining point of a threat compared to an error. And we can have lots of different types of these. So we can have like an operational threat. So this is something that's just part of your day-to-day job. There are time pressures to do things. There are times before the aircraft runs out of fuel, and I understand that there's a time, is it Stefan, an anaesthetologist, that you can't have them under anaesthetic for longer than a certain time. There you go, it's like running out of fuel for an aircraft. Just not quite as tragic for the anaesthetologist. As a pilot tends to be in the same boat, back to that conversation we had earlier on. But so these are the regular things that we see, as well as those other irregular things, maybe a slightly more complex operation. We can think about technological threats in terms of the fact, we use power, lighting, heating, all of the simulation stuff that you use. A lot of, I know your medical equipment is all power driven, and if that has a failure, then that would be a threat as well. But also things like cyber attack. The NHS a few years ago had a big cyber attack. Certainly something that everyone's been very aware of during COVID. I know a lot of companies have really heightened their security there. Something here in aviation, environmental. So for us, obviously the weather is a big thing, but also in healthcare. I was thinking, what about if you've got a small hospital, maybe out on a Shetland island, maybe in the middle of Africa somewhere. Maybe if you've got really poor air pollution around the area. Maybe if you had a technological failure, no heating, no air conditioning, that could suddenly then lead to an environmental threat. Plus the fact you've got to think things like COVID. All of these other biological threats that are out there. They're things that are outside of our control but do pose threats to us in our environment. Sadly, we also get these organisational threats. Things that the managers think are a really good idea. And when it gets down to you, you're the one that feels the pain with it. So that can be quite difficult. And there are so many other buckets we could put threats into here. We could put them into crews and team issues, violent and disruptive passengers. I'm sure you get patients like that as well. Has everyone seen those videos on YouTube where people get dragged off the United Airlines flight, etc.? It happens to all of us. So these are other threats outside of our control. So there are these two categories, overt threats and latent threats. So first of all, overt threats. These are the things that we really easily see. These are things that are quite obvious. Oh look, there's a massive thunderstorm over there. I can see it, it's right there. Power outage. Oh, it's all gone dark and quiet. It's an obvious threat. There's also threats that are latent threats, and these are much more tricky to be able to see. These are maybe things like your unexpected patient reaction, like something's not right. Dave spoke earlier on about just having that feeling that something wasn't quite right and you couldn't quite put your finger on what it was. Cultural barriers. You might be expecting someone to respond in a certain way to this scenario. But actually you've got a visiting clinician from another hospital and their standard operating procedure means that they respond to it in a different manner. So it doesn't just have to be a cultural thing in terms of national cultures, but even just trust to trust. You might find that there are these cultural differences and you might not see them. These are the ones you've really got to watch out for. So they're threats. Things that come at us when we're not expecting it, that we cannot control. So what's an error then? Something that's us. Something that we did. And there's different categories of these. So, 4 categories. Slip. I meant to do A, but by mistake I did B. So I would be quite happily flying the aircraft, air traffic give us a little bell on the radio and say, okay, you can descend down to 3,000 feet. And I go, Roger, descending to 2,000 feet. Oh, no, sorry, 3,000 feet. I knew what it was. I knew exactly it was 3,000 feet. But actually what I've done is I've dialed up into the machine 2,000 by mistake. I've pressed the wrong button. So this is when my correct thoughts behind it, I knew what I was supposed to do. I wanted to do the right thing, but just a slip of the finger meant that something was slightly wrong. And they're quite easy to see. I know that I'm trying to dial up 2,000, and if I press the 3,000 button by mistake, or vice versa, I go, oh, no, sorry, wrong one. And I can correct that error really quickly. Then there's a lapse. This is an omission in a number of steps. So I might know that I need to go to get to the training centre that I'm going to drive to this morning. I'm going to go left, left, right, right, left. Well, if I miss one of those rights, I am not going to get to where I want to be. Okay? So it's just an omission in a step. Now, mistake, this is slightly different from the slip. A slip, remember, we knew what the right thing was, but we just did the wrong thing as an error. A mistake is there was some form of misunderstanding, maybe missing information, but you intended to do the wrong thing. Not that you knew it was wrong, you thought in your mind it's right. but it just happened to be the wrong course of action. So maybe faulty decision making, so missing information, someone hasn't told you something. So I'm going to do course of action A, and someone says, oh, but, oh, I didn't know that. Okay, actually, so that's now the wrong thing to do. Okay, so that's a mistake. And then we get the scary word, violation. And now people often get really scared and say, oh, fire them, throw them in jail, throw the whole force of the law at them. They violated a regulation or a rule. Can't do that. There's often really good reasons that people violate. Dave told you about the Kobayashi Maru. Who in the room here then was it that knows what the Kobayashi Maru was? Yeah, a few hands still. So those unwinnable situations. There are situations you can get into where there is no correct answer, and anything you do would be breaking one of these rules. You've got to do something. You can't just sit there and do nothing. And that then means that some of the processes might need to change, some of the systems might need to change, some of the regulations might need to change. And all these things are really, really important to be able to see where our errors fit, because then we know what to do about them. So we've got the threats, things that come at us, errors, things that we do. So those threats can often lead to us making an error, or we could just, human nature, we could just make an error without any threat at all. It happens, human. And they will then lead us to some form of undesired state, some place that we don't want to be, some place where those safety margins are really, really starting getting a little bit fine. We haven't quite yet got to the point of an accident or an incident. No one's hurt, no one's died, no one's lost an aircraft. But it's the sort of thing that you would want to spend more time on a debrief in. Maybe you'd put in like a near-miss type report of, oh, this happened, I want other people to learn from this. So that's what we call an undesired state. So now this is time where I'd like you to get a little bit involved. I'm going to try and see if you can identify some answers in Sudoku. And we're going to go through this and look at them as to whether they're threats or errors and what that undesired state will be. Who likes Sudoku? You all know what Sudoku is, right? Yes. Okay, so time for some shouting out of some numbers. Right, so first of all, threats. So first of all, I've got time pressure to do this because I think we all want to go to the bar in about half an hour, right? So we do have some time pressure to get the Sudoku done, right? What other threats are there to me completing this Sudoku? What other external influences could be in this room, in this hotel, that's going to stop me getting this right? Bar opens early. That's it. Someone hears some clinking off down the corridor. You'll be off. Yeah. Threat. That nothing to do with me. Can't control it. I'll be first in the line, by the way. Fire alarm. Yeah, fire alarm. We could all be off and out. Distraction. Yeah, definitely distraction. Oh, I used to have a co-pilot when I was doing these. We used to get lots of sandstorms in Basra, and we would sit and do some Sudokus because there's really not much else to do. And he used to wait until you got to those really, really expert ones. And you sit there going 5, 3, 7, 2. Distraction. Sorry? Yeah, it's kind of frowned on to shoot your co-pilot. Makes it a little bit difficult. He has a really important switch on his side that means you can switch the self-defense mechanism on and off. I can't reach that from the captain's side. So I kind of need them for that, if nothing else. I didn't say that, by the way. My co-pilots are all lovely.
Somebody nicks your pen?
Yeah, nicks your pen. Nicks your pen. So there's definitely things. So I think it's things like unserviceable phone, because now I do it on my phone quite a lot. And I'm going to talk about this, about doing it on my phone, because this is how the slips really come in. Fatigue. I might be really tired. I've tried doing one of these at like 3 o'clock in the morning when my kids have got me up, and I think, oh, I might as well sit here and do something. Yeah, I fail them 90% of the time. Rain. I got rain on my phone the other day, and it wouldn't type the right button, you know, when you touch screen, doesn't work. So these are the threats, the things that we see externally. So let's have a look at some errors. Right, a slip, the right intentions, but you did the wrong action. So here we go. What goes? 3? Yeah, 3? I know it's a 3. I'm going to go press 3 on my phone, and I'm going to miss the 3 and I hit the 2. A slip. I knew exactly what it was. I knew exactly what I wanted it to be. I just finger faffed on my phone and it didn't work. So we could go and correct that. So again, we can see that a slip very often we can correct quite quickly because we see what it is. We go, don't. We see that moment. Okay, let's look at the next one. Mistake, the wrong intention. So I'm going to look at these 2s along the top line, and I'm going to be trying to guess what's in here, and I'm going to go through some form of information in my head, and I'm going to go, I think that's a 2, and I'm going to go put a 2 in that box. Now, unless the computer tells me that I'm wrong putting a 2 in that box, I might not know this for quite some time. That's the difficult thing with a mistake. Because you did what you intended to do, even if someone reads back to you, yep, you've gone and put a 2 in that box. Yes, that's what I wanted to do. So you need to have someone even closely monitoring you. Why did you put a 2 in that box? Are you sure it's a 2 in that box? Could it possibly be something else? In fact, if you follow those 3, the 2 should actually go there. So I might not find this out for a little bit of a time. So we need that careful monitoring. We need that intervention. A lapse, missed a step. So at this point in my Sudoku, I like to go through and go, is it a 1? Yes, no. Is it a 2? Yes, no. Is it a 3? So I'm going to look at this one at the top there. Is it a 1? Yes, no. Is it a 1? No. 2? 3? 4? And then I get distracted. Is it an 8? Oh, could be. Is it a 9? Oh, must be an 8 then. Must be an 8 that goes in there, right? Did I complete all of the steps? No, it's not. It's actually a 6 that needs to go in there, okay? So that is a lapse. I've got distracted along the way. I've had a co-pilot that sat there giving me random numbers in the ears. My phone's rung. The children have started screaming. A patient has suddenly had an adverse reaction that you're not expecting. You're halfway through doing something and suddenly they've got a bleed on something else. I don't know, I say these things like I know. I only watch Grey's Anatomy. It's bleeding. That's all I know. So that's the sort of lapse that we can do. And then we get violation. This is when I start to go, it's wrong. The whole system is wrong. It doesn't work. This one is impossible to do it. So I'm going to go and put a 6 there because that's how I'm going to make it work. Because that's the only way I can make it work. And I can do that with the best intentions. I can do this trying to be my perfect professional self that I think all of us like to be. But it still can be in contravention to these rules of Sudoku. Now in this situation, I can't change the rules of Sudoku, but what I can do is go back to the hierarchy and say, well, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. I put a 2 and I meant to put a 3 and a 3 and a 2 and I ended up putting a 6 in there. I'm really sorry. Stress, fatigue, time pressures, distraction. If a similar person would do the similar thing in the same situation, then you need to look at the situation that has led to it. You need to look at the procedures, the processes. What put someone in that position that they would make that mistake, or that they had to make that violation? Okay. If you do follow it through, anyone still trying to complete it, it should be a 9 in that box. I trusted my daughter to finish this off later on. And that was what my daughter managed to come up with. She's 9, by the way. I thought she did quite well. With a few scribbles everywhere. And then little like arrows on the edge. No, I really mean this one's an 8, mummy. Really, I do. Now, is that the desired state that we want at the end of a Sudoku? No. I'm a little bit OCD, but that just gives me kittens. I don't like that. I like them to look absolutely wonderfully perfect. And obviously it's not always going to look like that. But that's what we've got to drive towards. Okay? So threat and error management model. What are we now going to do with these threats and these errors and these undesired states? What are we going to do to make it safer? And this is how the model looks. Start off with safe operations. Everything's going smooth. Blue sky. Some of the flight crew, passengers are all nice and calm. They've even bought me a cup of tea. Not on a helicopter, sadly. That's Dave's job. They bring him cups of tea. I get given a bottle of water at best, or a Gatorade if I was really lucky. Helps stop you get dehydrated. Very important. Medics, yep, very important. So there I am, safe operations. Everything is perfect. And there are these threats that are out there. So this is the first thing I need to start thinking about, threats. And not just in the air. I need to think about this before I go into the situation. What are those threats? And what we do is we prepare for the threats, we repair any errors, and we try and recover from an undesired state. So let me give a little bit more information about what each of those layers mean. So with the threats, that's our exclamation mark there. I have to prepare as best I can for them. Remember, there are things out there. I don't have direct control over them. But if I know there's going to be difficult weather, maybe I take a bit of extra fuel. If I know that a patient has a really, really rare blood type, maybe I stock a whole load of extra of that rare blood type just in case they're suddenly going to need it. I'm sure there's plenty of other examples there. That's my limit from Grey's Anatomy. Errors. An error happens. Oh, I put a 3 and I meant to put a 2 in. Change it. Monitor. Intervene. Open to discussions. Now, I know that that's going to be really, really difficult in this hierarchical situation that we have both in aviation and in the healthcare. I sat there as a really young co-pilot and as female, and like the only female on my flight, with a really experienced, it was my squadron commander. And he went and said, nope, this is what we're doing. And I was like, okay, if you say so. Thinking, I don't think we should be doing this. I think this is a really bad idea. But we need to break down that barrier. We need to be able to know how to monitor and intervene safely and effectively, so that if an error is made, we can repair it as quickly as possible. And we want to repair it here. We do not want this to get any further to that undesired state, because that's when our safety margins are getting really small. Don't want to get that far. If we do end up then in this undesired state, this is where we have to be so careful. You did it. I didn't do it. I didn't touch it. Dave touched it. Dave, did you flick that switch? I told you not to flick that switch. That is so not important at this point right now. At this point right now that you have a reduced safety margin, the only thing you need to do is get yourself back to those safe operations. The discussions can wait till after. Debrief. For us, it was always on the ground. For you guys, I suggest like after whatever clinical event has occurred. Let everyone calm down. Step away from it. Then have your learning discussion afterwards. Because while that Air France 447 that Dave mentioned earlier on, while the computer was saying, stall, 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 they were like, oh, I don't understand what's happening. Just telling you, stall, stall, stall. Well, I really don't understand because I did this, this, and this, and you did that, that, and that. It doesn't matter. Recover the aircraft. Recover your situation. And I think that works in healthcare as well. Get straight back to that safe operations. All the discussions happen later. So here's things we can do. We can train and we can practice. I listened to a wonderful, so I'm going to make you stand out now, Emily. I listened to a wonderful talk earlier about Emily about the 5 stages of integrating simulation into training. That training and practice is so hugely important so that all of our students are then prepared by the time they get to one of these places. And that includes decision making. Dave's presentation earlier on recognition prime decision making. Exactly how are we going to get all of those ideas, those thoughts from everybody else's head? We read, we look at other things that went wrong, we learn from others' mistakes. SOPs and regulations, always written with the best intention, we need to keep them up to date. They've got to be fit for purpose. We can't just allow them to disappear and never actually be seen properly. We can't allow people to go, oh, well, it's all right. I did this regulation, but I didn't do this one because, and then your student goes, oh, okay. And then they go, oh, well, I didn't do that regulation because, so-and-so said they didn't do that regulation. And suddenly it spreads and you've got no one following the regulations. If a regulation doesn't work, if an SOP does not work, do something about it. Why doesn't it work? What should it do instead? Mnemonics. Now, I do like mnemonics. And I like them for the reason that when you start off in training, you don't have that recognition prime decision making. And Dave again touched on this morning. You need to get that experience somehow. And in the absence of anything else, if you have no idea what to do, starting with a mnemonic can at least give you something to do. Because I am one of those firm believers that sometimes, a lot of the time, it can be worse just to sit there and do nothing, than to at least try and do something. So mnemonics, if you do have them, they do work as that aide-memoire to jog the mind, to get it going in the right direction. And it gives you like a framework. It can make it feel comfortable. It can make something that otherwise would be really alien, it can make it then feel really, really familiar. Checklists, same thing. Just trying to get some form of standardization from it. And if you are then doing monitoring and intervention correctly, if someone misses one of their steps in a checklist, you see it, you notice it. They're doing it in a random order. It's really difficult to go, hang on, did you do 4 and 5? Oh no, you did 7 and 8 already, but have you done 4 and 5? So if we get that order that things go in, that starts to make that easier. Again, monitoring and intervention, I could do a whole other presentation on monitoring and intervention, but it's about Posing questions. Is that supposed to be like that? Asking, should I do this, that, or the other? Challenging. Oh, I really don't think that's exactly right. And if all of those fail, it's an emergency. So pace, pose a question, ask about a little bit more information, find out more, challenge, I really don't think that's right, and then emergency at the end of it. Loads of stuff online, by the way, if you look up PACE model and monitoring and intervention, loads of stuff online. And decision making, I think Dave covered that brilliantly this morning, so I won't labour on about that now. But like I said, you've got to concentrate on getting back to that safe recovery. So, so, so important. So I guess that brings me to what are we going to do with that now? There's a model. I've shown you a nice picture. There was colours. There was arrows. Didn't it look smart? Is that going to help you now? What are you going to do with that now? There's a few things I can suggest. You need to embed this in all of your training activities. This isn't something that you come here, you come to a conference, you see a pretty coloured model on the board, you go back, you give your students one lesson, and you forget about it. This is something that every time they go into a simulation exercise, we should have part of that pre-brief to say, right, threat and error management, what are we doing with that today? Ask the students, what are the threats? What are the errors? How are you going to prepare? Repair and recover. And we need to do that in every single training activity so it starts to become a part of the norm for them. Just something they do automatically. And we really need to show positive examples. And this is another reason I like Dave's presentation from this morning, because he doesn't show you a massive crash and go, oh, what went wrong? We do that in aviation lots. Look at this big burning hole in the ground. What went wrong? We go, oh, it's the pilot's fault. They flew into the ground. Yep, that's what went wrong. It's never that simple. We need to show waggle, something I learned in my teaching. Anyone know what waggle stands for? Ah, yes, a new thing to teach you all. What a good one looks like. Waggle. What a good one looks like. And I learned that in school. And actually kids really, really notice if you don't do this. If I turned up to a class of students and said, I'd like you to go and draw me a cottage, I would get like 30 different cottages in the room. Whereas if I said to them, you get a point for every flower you draw in the cottage, you get an extra 10 points if it's thatched roof. If you've got a nice little log fire burning in there, that's 5 points. You'll start to get a much more refined picture of what it is I was imagining they were going to do. So you're giving them some really clear criteria. If I now show them a picture of a cottage and say, I would like you to draw this, what a good one looks like. They're going to know much better. We're not just going to take it back and go, no, did that wrong, did that wrong, did that wrong. So there we go. There was my daughter's one. I can't just show her that and go, no, that's not what it's supposed to look like. I need to then say, actually, darling, this is what I'd like it to look like. And that can be so much more powerful than saying, you did that wrong, you did that wrong, you did that wrong, you did that wrong. Waggle. Great, great word. Love it. And just culture. Again, this could be a whole another presentation later on just culture. Being able to admit when we've made a mistake is really hard. I don't like doing it. Particularly my boss is sat at the back of the room. I don't want to say, oh, sorry, I really stuffed up that. But actually, we can learn from these things. And you need to try and take out some of that emotion from it. And that's where, again, simulation gives you the ability to do that. Non-jeopardy. There isn't a patient actually dying on the table. You can say, right, hang on, stop. What happened here? You can have that open discussion. Well, I thought I was doing this. No bad decisions. Because you can see why they decided to do that. Then you say, well, actually, had you considered these other things? Oh, I see that now. We undo that mistake. They did what they thought was right, but it just happened to be missing information. We can pause that in simulation and we can use those errors to our advantage. Learn from our mistakes. And in that classroom setting, learn from as many other people's mistakes as possible. Again, something was told to me when I came out of flying training. It was a really high-ranking somebody in the Army Air Corps. And he said, you start your career with a bag full of luck and an empty bag of experience. And the aim is to fill up your bag of experience before your bag of luck runs out. And that stage I thought, oh God, I don't want to fly with you. His bag of luck's run out. Luckily he had buckets of experience, so we were okay. But these discussions really need to be there. That just culture is hugely important. And I pulled this from a WHO document in 2009. Didactic lectures are not the best way to teach these. So this takes us straight back to why we're all here, why simulation is so important, why we need to be practicing this in as close to real life as possible. Otherwise, the smallest thing, when you suddenly get to real life, we're like, oh, it's not like the simulator. And in fact, one of my very near crashes was flying across the Massif Central in France, bringing an aircraft back from Iraq. It had been in Iraq for a year, this aircraft, so it had no need for any anti-icing stuff on it. It was now November and trying to fly up across the Massif Central. Lots of snow. And we had things start to break and it didn't work and it was getting quite scary. We were in cloud, the aircraft was icing up and the aircraft was going down and there was nothing I could do about it because I was pulling as much power as I could, doing everything I possibly could to not suddenly see a mountainside come out of the cloud at me. Thankfully, I'm stood here today, it didn't happen. But I tell you what happened at that time is I suddenly turned around in the aircraft and looked down the little narrow bit between the two seats at the back and saw 6 very scared engineers. I thought, oh, this isn't the simulator. And that was a thing for me that I remember feeling so shocked at the time. Because the simulator always had this nice little curtain that you just pulled across. And you couldn't see the sim instructor sat the other side of the curtain. And suddenly just that one missing of the curtain there threw me completely. So, I really want you to think about what we're going to do with this when you walk away from here. Now, I don't want you walking away from it thinking, oh God, was that a threat? Was it an error? Latent? You could argue black is white and white is black with a load of these definitions. That is not the point. The point of this is to start discussions. Whether you label it a threat or an error, and Dave and I have the thing about is the mountain for an aircraft a threat because the mountain doesn't jump out at you. The mountain's just sat there on its own. Okay? But there are lots of people in aviation that will swear blind that the mountain is a threat. Do you know what? It doesn't matter. Let's just discuss the mountain. It's still there. I don't care. The mountain doesn't care what label you put on it. It's still there. But let's discuss what we can do. And that's where those 3 things really work. That prepare, repair, and recover. So I want to leave you with this as kind of the closing points for this. I want you to think, how can we do better? How can we put this into our simulation experiences? How can we start those discussions? Is there extra training that you need to do this? I'd suggest that maybe your students might even need to know the model just to begin with, just so they've got something to know what you're waffling on about, like threat and error management. At least tell them what it is first. What do you need to do to put that into your systems? Are there any other systems that need changing? Are you seeing repeated patterns of mistakes or errors in the same place, or even violations? It's a well-known thing in aviation again, but people would miss putting down the undercarriage the correct way. So now every single aircraft, the undercarriage lever is shaped like a wheel, because it gives you an extra sense to know that you've got your hand on the correct lever. So that was obviously a mistake. People were wanting, or a slip, people were wanting to put the undercarriage down. They were just moving the flaps by mistake. It's not going to help you land. Well, it will, it just won't make it particularly smooth. You have a nice smooth bottom to your aircraft afterwards. So are those procedures then fit for purpose? Are there other things in the system, that behavioural analysis all around it? And this is again where the Human Performance Council becomes really important with our behavioural psychologists. We can say to them, why do humans do this? Because I don't know. I'm a pilot and a teacher. I don't know half the time why I do things, and then the behavioural psychologists go, oh, what did I do? Like, oh, you just, oh, okay, right. Yeah, they're quite scary to talk to. Wonderful ladies. Where are the black spots? So they're things that are always happening. Can you identify those? And again, labelling these things as slips, mistakes, errors, and so can help you identify those black spots. But again, it's the discussion, not the labelling. And if you can manage to find any of those latent threats, then that can be a really, really good thing to start looking for and working out how you're going to deal with those. So I'll just leave you with that picture there. That's what we'd like to do. Safe operations, prepare, repair, and recover. And now I know that the bar will be opening really quite soon. But if anyone has any questions, etc., I'll be more than happy to try and answer them. Just please remember, I know nothing about healthcare.
Fascinating presentation, Joe. Thanks a lot. This is a cheeky but a very serious question.
Mm-hmm.
Every patient safety conference, there will be one lecture on what we can learn from aviation
Very nice. Very, very nicely done. I actually wasn't at the EATS just a couple of weeks ago, but Dave was. I think Dave can probably answer that one.
Yes, frequently. So Martin Bromley is a friend. I just put a picture of you with Joe up on Facebook to make him laugh. But I invited, I'm chairman of the Royal Aeronautical Society Training Specialist Group, and about 3 years ago we had a conference about what aviation can learn from the outside world, and that's where we had people like Martin and others come in from the nuclear industry and others, so that we could learn that there. And I'll tell you something, and I'm not saying this just to blow smoke up wherever you blow smoke up for you guys. I actually no longer believe that aviation is at the pinnacle of understanding these areas. I think in some places the healthcare system is ahead of us now. But that doesn't matter. It's what we do together that counts next, right?
And this is why the Human Performance Council, again, yeah, thank you very much, Dave, sorry. This is why that I would believe so strongly in the Human Performance Council. When I was asked to set this up, and Stefan was one of the first that I grabbed to say, come on, you need to help me work with this, because we do have really similar environments. So we now have in the Human Performance Council, we've got maritime within CAE and external. We've got healthcare within CAE and externally through Staffordshire University. Thank you, Emily. We also have defence and security through CAE. Plus we've now got the German military asking about a ship patient simulator. Sounds like all my worlds colliding, like aviation, military and everything. And maritime, I know nothing about ships either. We're also then looking at whole other companies that are interested, Eurocontrol, which supply all the air traffic services across Europe. And there are huge parallels between all of these different industries because we all have that safety critical environment. And that's the strength of the Human Performance Council. We don't want someone to come to us and I'll go, oh, here we go, aviation, we know what to do, here's the answer. Because it's not. It's not the singular answer. And there could be things in these that we have totally missed and that still don't fit the bill exactly for what you want in healthcare, or what the rail network might like, or the police forces, nuclear industry. But if we sit with the Human Performance Council and we discuss these, we can look at all these different performance environments and start to see where are the best bits that we can take for each of them. And it's about that collaboration.
Is there any difference in style, content, or emphasis between human factors training in military aviation as opposed to civilian aviation? Or is it exactly the same?
No, it's still exactly the same, but purely because it all comes down from ICAO. So it comes down through ICAO to the EASA previously, and now the UK CAA. We also then have, standing alongside the UK Civil Aviation Authority, have a Military Aviation Authority. That came into effect after Nimrod exploded over Afghanistan and the Haddon Cave inquiry. Anyone know about Nimrod? It was a really old aircraft based on the old Comet aircraft. And it was flying over Afghanistan, and there were some known problems with the aircraft, but basically it exploded mid-air from actually a very, very simple failure. But it was systemic failures in the system that had been missed by the Civilian Aviation Authority because it was a military aircraft. So then the Military Aviation Authority stood up again. So we take down the same regulations from the same hierarchy. So although it will be applied in very different environments, the defence environment, obviously we take a lot more risks.
That's what I'm thinking, because we often rank the civil aviation human factors, but in acute medicine and acute surgery, we often have a no-fly option. We have to fly.
Yeah.
The patient needs operated on. So we operate on less than ideal circumstances. And I wondered if that affects military attitude.
There's definitely a balance to be had there, because the helicopter force has been a very difficult place over the last 10 years. Another crash happened at Catterick Garrison that killed a couple of colleagues of mine, sadly. And it really showed that people were spending a lot of time in a war zone and were starting to become normalised to that pressured environment and where you would push the boundaries. They were then taking that flying back to the United Kingdom, where there weren't the operational pressures. People weren't shooting at you. You didn't have to fly at 50 feet, 100 feet was fine. You didn't need to fly that fast and low. A little bit higher and slower was fine. You didn't need to swing it around at this angle of bank. You didn't need to go that low on the fuel. So it is a systemic problem of trying to stop people do that, because the more you put people in war zones, the more they're going to stretch the boundaries. It's human nature. but it's about then the training that you go around it. And I think that's really become much more known about over the last, sort of 10 years since I left the military. But the basic core training is exactly the same. Excellent. Oh,
Just playing the devil's advocate here.
please do.
Acknowledging safety is important. I mean, loss of lives is always a tragedy. We need to look at it very seriously. But is there a danger of sometimes overdoing our checks? I mean, especially in the current climate where NHS is looking for productivity and efficiency.
There always has.
In an aviation sort of climate, is there any parallel processes that happens that you keep a check on not overdoing things unnecessary?
All of the checks and the regulations we have will need to keep evolving. And this is why I think we should start with some of this threat and error management from a really early stage in training for medical students. Because if we can get it as part of their standard, what they know right from the beginning, it's not going to take a huge amount of time and effort off the final operations at the end. It becomes part of the way you do things. It becomes a natural thing to think about threats and errors and how you're going to manage those throughout a situation. There are lots of time pressures. There are lots of monetary pressures that go with it as well. And this is where I really do believe that we need the buy-in from some of the larger organisations to commit to adding to safety with this. If people just keep driving for the money goals at the end of it, great, you can have all this money. You can go flying with a passenger jet through whatever weather you want to, if you really want to take the fee paying passengers. But what's more expensive then? The loss of life, the loss of reputation, or the loss of a few minutes. And that's where the organisational structure and the management, the leadership of the individual companies really needs to grab hold of this as well.
If I can make a remark. So, first of all, thank you very much. I think there is a way to discuss this theoretically, right? Like the questions we just had, the diagrams you mentioned, and so on. I think there's also a realization that has to happen in all of us that these things are not theoretical, they're really happening. So, as an anesthetist, I know statistically I'm going to go through a difficult airway situation or maybe a failed airway situation in my career because it's just a high probability that this is going to happen. So I need to prepare for that. So accepting the risk and knowing that it's likely going to hit us is probably important. And then the other thing, if it's outside the threat, that's sort of, to me, looks like nobody is to blame because it's from the outside and maybe there's an undesired state that could be a disease or injury or something. But the errors are really where I feel or I felt it hit me because this is something that could be blame put on somebody, including me, co-workers or somebody else. So I think to accept the fact that these things exist is really a big takeaway from aviation, so going back to the remarks, because that's still a cultural issue in healthcare. So are we going to see these things? Are we going to live through these things? And is one question, and the other one is, do we accept that there are errors and not sound as if typically no, we don't make these errors. So I think that's a big difference in here. And I'm very grateful for you to put this diagram up there because it shows that you can very openly just admit that they exist, and maybe that's something, occasionally at least, where we are not very good at, and realize we all make these mistakes. And we live in that system where we have those errors. Thanks, just a remark.
Okay. To the bar? Or Thank you. I'll leave that to you.